Okay, I think we should get started. It's 5:06. We'll just let people in as they come along. But thank you all for registering and logging into this roundtable. We're really looking forward to the discussion tonight. Most of you, I think, know me. I'm Kim Clerkin. I'm the US Squash Vice President of Programs and Events. And I think I have spoken to many of you, certainly recently, on the regional junior focus groups. And during those meetings, it was really evident that there was a lot of concern among the junior community regarding college recruitment, especially this year with the pandemic and stopping the normal cycle of junior tournaments. And so I spoke a lot with David Pullman, who's the CSA Executive Director, about how we could help, and hence we have these meetings. So during this meeting, just so that you know, I would like you all, if you could, to keep your video off and to remain muted unless you have something to say. And also, if you can have your chat open, and then you can put any questions that you may have or any comments you may have in the chat, and we'll make sure that any questions are addressed during the course of the presentation. But I'm going to hand over now to David, and he was going to run the meeting. We have several coaches on the call tonight, and he will be introducing them to you. So David, I'll hand over to you and start your presentation.
Great. Thanks so much, Kim. It's great to be here. Really honored and thrilled to be able to share this important information with everyone today. Really grateful for our coaches who are jumping on, and I'll introduce them in a moment. Kim, if you go to the next slide, we'll talk about the agenda. While you take a look at that, I do want to introduce the CSA itself, the College Squash Association, as we all know it. The CSA is an independent entity. We have our own board of directors, and as Kim said, I'm the executive director and lead commissioner. I've been playing squash for a while. I picked it up in college, and so I was a college student athlete, just like many of you on this call. And I've been in athletics administration on campuses and in this role for over 13 years now. The CSA has had many forms over the years. It's college squash is almost 100 years old, and the organization that runs it has had many forms. But this one in particular reconstituted itself in 2017, so just 3 years ago. Like I said, it created an independent board of directors that has 5 independent members and 4 coaches and 1 ex officio member. They've been in place for about 3.5 years. I came on board. I just finished my 2nd year in this role as executive director and lead commissioner. So this iteration of the CSA is relatively new, and we are taking a number of strides to continue to build on the growth that we've seen, and really kind of get some things in order so that we can continue to grow and expand our organization and also college squash on the whole. One of the reasons that we're here and we exist is college squash, as many of you know, is not an NCAA sponsored sport, and so we are the official governing body of intercollegiate squash. And although we are, before I get to that, I just so a number of things that we're working on. We've created a conduct review practice and policy. We've implemented some changes to the way things are done during the season. And we're starting to get to the point where we're looking to expand our reach and our footprint. So we have started a mailing list. And as many of you look ahead to college squash, are interested in what's going on with our organization, please I encourage you to join. There's a link on the top of our website, which is csasquash.com. Or you can email admin@csasquash.com, and I can send you the link for that. We'll also be launching some fundraising initiatives as well. As an independent entity, we'll be looking to increase our revenues and sell some sponsorships. So that's something to look forward to as well. I think we are partners and very close affiliates with US Squash. That's part of how this came together so easily with Kim and her team. US Squash supports us in lots of different ways that are very important to the running of our organization. They support our events, our championships. They support a lot of our back-end services, from finances to operations and website and Club Locker as well. So we're really indebted to them in a lot of ways. But we do have that independent sense of ability to make decisions and kind of get our house in order as well. So we're really pleased to be here. We've partnered on these. This is now our, Kim just mentioned, this is our 6th junior event to the junior community about college recruiting. Some of the previous ones from last year, the JCT and the US Open, there's links to those on our website as well. So you can see a video in the PowerPoint that we used last year. And I've captured some of that and into this presentation, and we're recording this one. And so we'll post this one along with the one from last week. So you've digested the agenda now. You can see we'll do some intros. Just want to touch very briefly on sort of the status of college squash since the pandemic has hit. And then we'll get into the real meat of our presentation with the recruiting. We'll have 3 different sections there. After each section, we'll open up the questions from the group. So try and keep your questions on topic. If you don't want to speak up to speak to the entire group, please, as Kim said, put your questions in the chat directly to her, and she'll pass them along, or she'll raise them at the appropriate time. So Kim, if you can go to the next slide. So I'm really pleased to introduce our coaches on the panel today. As you can see, they represent a cross-section of the teams, the members of the College Squash Association. So they'll provide some really wide-ranging and interesting input today. So just going in alphabetical order, pleased to introduce Nikki Clement, head men's and women's coach at Haverford College. Dylan Cunningham, assistant coach, Drexel University. Middlebury College head coach, Mark Lewis, is also a CSA board member. Head coach, men's and women's, Mike McDonald from Connecticut College. And Gail Ramsey, who's long history in the game, 4-time individual national champion, head women's coach at Princeton University. Thank you all so much for joining us, and interested to hear what you have to share for today. I am somewhat obligated to point out these folks are here to talk about general college recruiting questions. They will draw from their wide-ranging personal experience, but these are not meant to be recruiting presentations for their schools. So if you can refrain from asking specific questions about what their school's policies or what they leave those for the time when you're able to reach out to them directly, I would appreciate it, and we'll move forward from there. So thank you very much, everyone, and our coaches. Kim, next one, please. So as I said, really briefly, I just want to touch on some of what's been going on with us. As a few people alluded to in the question form that were submitted, we have had some disappointments in that some of our varsity teams have lost their varsity status over the last couple of months due to challenges and faced from the pandemic and financial challenges as well. So we recognize that each of these schools have unique challenges, and we're working really hard to work with them. And fortunately, the community is just coming together in great ways. US Squash, as I mentioned, is a great partner of ours, and we're building closer ties with the Squash Education Alliance as well. We've created a joint working group, which is fantastic. We've also increased our regular communication with the coaches. As I think you're all finding out, the regular connections are so important, and so our ability to touch base with the coaches on a regular basis has been really key for us, and that goes into a lot of the scheduling scenarios that we're considering. We're still really hoping to provide a season, although it'll likely be condensed sometime after January 2021. So stay tuned on that. But these connections and the working group that we've put together have really been instrumental in helping us. And as you can see, I won't go through all the other points, but we've really taken an aggressive approach to assessing ourselves, evaluating where we are and what we need to do and I'm really confident that we'll come out of this, the pandemic and some of these challenging times, as a stronger entity and a stronger community as a whole. In particular, we've reached out directly from our board chair to key decision makers on campuses, the athletic directors in particular, and the principal members from US Squash and SEA have done the same thing. And so we're really getting our message out there and making sure that it stays relevant throughout this process. Kim, if you can go to the next one. So again, we'll have 3 sections of the recruiting presentation, and after each section, we'll stop, take a break, and open it up for questions from the group. So we'll move to the first one, because I know we have more of a general group this time. I just wanted to touch on the recruiting timeline as it stands now. One of the questions that we got was, when does the recruiting process start, and how long does it go? And so I wanted to start at the beginning. Players become prospective student athletes when they enter their 9th grade year in high school, or their first year of high school. And these are sort of what we recommend focusing on during that first year of high school. Coaches cannot be contacting you, recruiting you actively when it's your first year of high school. So now that is really the time to focus on your academics, focus on being a good citizen. That means behaving appropriately at all times, on the court and off the court, on social media as well. Working on your communication skills so that when you get to the part where you're trying to communicate with coaches or college admissions offices, you're ready to do that. And then, of course, honing your squash skills, making sure that you're staying as on top of the game as possible. But that's not really the priority at that point when it comes to recruiting. Kim, if you go to the next group. When you move on to your second year of high school, your sophomore year, you have to maintain all the things that you've done previously in your first year and even before that, the academics, the citizenship and communication skills, but then also starting to get yourself ready to be evaluated and get in touch with coaches. So that includes updating your Club Locker profile, making sure things are public, your graduation year and your contact information is available. You can start researching some schools if you're ready to do that. That may be early for some people, and that's fine. But starting to get a sense of what type of school you're looking for or what location it can be important. You should consider taking the standardized tests at that point. If you're ready again, if you're not ready, again, that's fine. You have plenty of time to do that. But the sophomore year could be a time when you start prepare for that. And then you can look into, and I know this can happen earlier as well, but you can research and attend some squash camps, find out what coaches are going to be where they might be working, and what sort of ability to connect with them and show what sort of a worker you are, what sort of communicator you are there. I know that may not have applied this summer. I know a lot, if not all of the camps were canceled in some way or another. But again, we're hoping that changes in the future and things go back to normal and have that opportunity. So if you're early on in the process, just because they were canceled this year doesn't mean it's going to happen in the future, and you should look out for those opportunities. Kim, if you go to the next one. So the rest of this is when we really hit kind of the rubber meets the road and we start talking about this. I like to look at it kind of like as a continuum or an arrow, and looking at it on a visual. The first opportunity for coaches to have recruiting contact with you, and recruiting contact is specifically designed messages, whether via text or email, phone calls, invitations to campus, or when they're visiting you off campus. The first time they can do that is September 1st of your junior year or your third year of high school. So for some of you, that just hit yesterday, and that really starts the beginning part of the process. The only date that's different than that, Kim, if you can click again, is January 1st of your junior year. And that's the first opportunity for an official visit. An official visit is when you are invited to visit campus by the coach. And in some cases, they may offer to pay some of your way to campus, whether it's meals or housing and travel and things like that. So September 1st of your junior year, Kim, if you could click, just really kicks off this continuum. And that's when, in some cases, coaches will reach out. They have the opportunity to do that. You have the opportunity to reach out to them, and you can hope for and expect, possibly in some cases, a response at that point. And it goes all the way to the end, and we'll get to that in a moment. Along the way, starting at this point, this junior year, a few things can happen that I'm sure many of you have heard about, and I want to just talk about a little bit. So Kim, if you can click on the first one. The first is called a verbal offer, and that could come in some very specific cases as early as September 1 of your junior year. So that may have, in some rare cases, that may have happened already for some people. But we must keep in mind that a verbal offer is just an offer by the coach to submit your to support your application in the admissions process. So it's not a guarantee of admission by any means. And there's still, as you can see kind of on our continuum example here, there's still a long way to go to reach the end point of this process. Is it great to get that level of support? Absolutely. And it gets you pretty far down the road. It gets you a good way down the road towards admission, but it doesn't get you all the way there. And you have to maintain some standards that we'll talk about in a moment all the way through in order to hold on to that support from the coaches. Kim, if you could click again. The second part that comes along the way is what's called an academic pre-read. And if in a lot of cases, almost all the cases with our membership, this doesn't come until July 1st after your junior year. So we're looking at from September 1st to July 1st, you're looking at 10 months of time when this process could be playing out. And it's not always a constant stream of communication. It doesn't always start right at the beginning and go all the way through. It can happen lots of different ways. And that's one of the themes that I think you'll hear throughout from our coaches and from myself, is that every coach's and every school's process is different. And so you really have to reach out, create relationships, and do your research to understand what the schools that you're interested are expecting. So an academic pre-read is just the admissions office taking a look at your credentials after your junior year and giving a favorable or unfavorable rating about those credentials for their particular school. Again, as you can see on our continuum, a favorable reading is great. It really gets you far along in the process, but it is not a guarantee offer of admission. Even if you have that support from the coach, that verbal offer, and you have a favorable pre-read, there's still a long way to go. One part in Ivy League circles that gets you almost all the way there, Kim, if you could click again, is something called a likely letter. And a likely letter is only an Ivy League institution thing. It's a letter from the admissions office to the recruit or to the student athlete saying that you are more likely than not to be accepted. But you have to uphold certain standards all the way through, or that acceptance could be rescinded. Now, I say more likely than not because you can see on our continuum that there is still a possibility that it doesn't get you all the way there. It gives you a great peace of mind, and it almost fills up the whole arrow, but it's not the whole way there. And the main reason for that, Kim, if you can click, is this list of obligations that I've compiled based on research that I've done and conversations that I have of things that you need to uphold all the way through. Kim, I don't know if you've clicked. There we go. So these are flashing because they're really of utmost importance. Throughout this process, really from freshman year all the way to when you graduate, you need to do all these things. You need to get the best grades possible. You need to get the best test scores that you can possibly get. Take the most rigorous classes. Take the application, the essay seriously. Show the schools that you're applying to that you really want to be there and why you really want to be at that particular school. You need to act appropriately with good citizenship, both in public and in private, and you need to play good squash. Now, that may seem like a lot, but that's the ticket to getting you into school by through this sort of this squash avenue. And you do all that, and you get to, Kim, if you can click one more time, you get to the end of the arrow, which is the offer of admission. And the one key point that I need to bring up about that is the offer of admission, just like the likely letter in Ivy League cases, only comes from the office of admissions at the school. Coaches can support you all the way through in most cases, but ultimately the decision comes from the office of admission, and you have to wait for that letter in order to be fully guaranteed to be accepted. And it's incredibly important to keep that in mind all the way through. One last point before we open up to the coaches for comments and for questions. Kim, if you can go to the next slide. I just want to talk very briefly about testing requirements. We've gotten some questions about what test optional looks like. Your first stop for this information needs to be with the admissions offices at the schools that you're interested in and with the coaches. It's a two-pronged approach because your policies are going to be different from place to place. I know the policy at Middlebury and Haverford changed this year from what it was in the past. but it might be different for student athletes than it is for the regular population as well. And only the coaches really going to know that. So reaching out to the admissions offices and then also the coaches to get a better understanding of what the testing requirements are or what the expectations are is really, really important. If you read up on some of the announcements that have been made, I think almost 85% of top colleges and universities are going test optional for the current current application cycle. So those are the seniors who are applying, getting ready to apply this year. For a lot of you, that doesn't apply. They've only made the decision for this year, but they have not made it for anyone who's a junior and beyond. We don't know what that's going to look like. We don't know what the College Board and the ACT are going to decide about their tests. So you're going to have to monitor this, both with your own research and by staying in touch with coaches and admissions offices to understand what their plans are. Yeah, I just want to reiterate before we move on. It can be more restrictive for student athletes than it might be for the rest of the population. This is something that came up before. So again, reaching out to the coaches is really important. So before we open it up, coaches, do you have anything to add to anything that I've said so far on the timeline and testing requirements? Go ahead, Gail.
Hi, Dave. Thanks. Great job. You covered it really well. I think after admissions letter has been received, I have to say you really need to maintain good behavior and stay on track and out of trouble. That often some things happen afterwards, after the admissions letter has been accepted. It could happen in August. I've seen things happen that have been disappointing across the board for a lot of people. So I think it's always good to be your best citizen at all times.
That's a great point, Gail. I've seen it as well. One of my stints as an administrator was at Columbia University, and heard a lot of stories across the league and across with some peers, where it's not just poor citizenship, both in social media and in public, but also poor grades. If you're a straight A student and your grades dip after you've received that offer of admission, that could raise a red flag for admissions officers as well. So maintain the behavior that you've done all the way through high school, and everything will be great. All right, I'd like to open it up to questions from the group. Kim, I'm not sure if anything's come in at this time, but feel free, if anyone has a question, feel free to speak up or send it to Kim's way.
I have one question here from somebody who locked in on your slide that said, make sure your Club Locker profile is up to date. Could one of you explain what it is that you look for when you're looking at someone's Club Locker profile, so they know to make sure they have all the right information?
Go ahead, Dylan.
First thing I look for is graduation year. Just that's the biggest thing, is whether or not we can be reaching out to you. So graduation year is very important. I've seen some people that said they're graduating in 2013 and for this year, and I know that's not possible. So I don't know what year they are, and we can't reach out to them. So
Gail, go ahead. You have something to add?
Yeah, I just think that I've sent most of my recruiting letters to parents, so it'd be great if there's a spot where the student athlete, prospective student athlete, could have their accurate email. And I don't know if that's always possible, but if that's nice. I find that very helpful.
Mike, did I see your hand? Or are you good?
Gail said exactly what I was going to say. Just an up-to-date email, so that sometimes it doesn't have a person's name. It just has either letters or numbers, and you aren't sure exactly who you're reaching out to. So just making sure that that's yours or someone who is for sure going to get that contact to the prospective student athlete, because that's who we want to ultimately talk to, is the prospective student athlete.
That's great info. I hear that a lot. Mark, yeah, sorry, I don't want to jump in. Go ahead.
No, I agree with what everybody has said, all the other coaches have said, and I think the consistency of kind of messaging that the that the students put out. So if somebody's missing a piece of information from their profile, like Dylan, we can't even reach out to you if we don't know that basic information. But beyond that, I start to look at the data that's there, how old they are, where they're from, where they play, results. So it's all part of the picture. Looking at their history, their play history, their results history. And I think it's important to know that not one result does not define your career and your path. I think it's important to know that as a junior. If we see a history of pulling out of tournaments or a history of winning big matches or close matches, these are things that we're looking for kind of patterns that give us a clue into who you are as a player. That's valuable information.
Great points all around. I think to sum it up, it's really important, like when you reach that sophomore or even a junior year, the coaches use Club Locker as an entry point, almost to a person, and having the front facing information as accurate and up to date as possible really gives you the best shot if you're interested in being contacted by coaches. So that should be a key focus, and double checking to make sure that you can be contacted and the information is accurate.
How about another couple of questions about the ACT and SAT situation? Someone is saying that they have been told that the organizers of SATs and ACTs are going to be prioritizing seniors, and so juniors may not get the opportunity to take the test if it is a requirement of the college. Is that something that anyone can speak to? Is that true, I guess?
We'd have SAT people and the ACT people, wouldn't we? They should be on this call too, it sounds like.
Right, I know, but if that is the case, and it's very hard for a junior or to take an SAT, I mean, is that recognized as an issue, a potential issue for recruitment?
Go ahead, Gail.
Yeah, I think, well, it makes sense to prioritize seniors. Right at this point, I think if your SATs, if you can get those tests in sometime in the spring or, in the spring, and miss maybe these first couple October, November dates, I don't think that's a critical thing, but yeah, I think you'll be comfortable into the spring, and if that's the case and it's still difficult to take tests, I think it'll be addressed down the line with admissions, and that's another place to check with the coaches when possible.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Go ahead, Dylan.
Just also, everyone's going to be in the same boat. So if one junior can't take the SAT, all juniors are not going to be able to take. If they're not allowing juniors to take the SAT, then you guys will all be in the same boat, and the coaches, the 5 of us and everyone else, will kind of adapt accordingly. So it's not comparing yourself to the seniors, but comparing yourself to your current recruiting class. So.
Absolutely. That's all great perspective. Thank you for bringing that. That's a good question. It's a lot of that stuff is really out of our hands, just like a lot of these decisions around the pandemic. And so we're, one of the theme I would say is we're riding this wave alongside all of you. And we don't have all the answers, but we're going to be reacting and doing our best because we're interested in bringing squash student athletes to campuses. And so, a lot of it is just going to be patience and understanding and not getting too stressed about the ups and downs of that. This is a long process. Like I pointed out before, just got started for juniors, and it goes for over a year until they can even apply as seniors. And so there's a lot of time. Gail's point about waiting to do it to the spring is not the be all end all. And if test optional policies continue into the future years, they're going to look at those other things that we talked about as part of your application package even stronger. So, class rigor, the type of classes, the difficulty of the classes that you're taking, your grades in those classes, what teachers are saying about you, what guidance counselors are saying about you as a person. All that stuff just gets magnified if things are still test optional and you're not able to take tests. So it's all the more the reason to focus on those other things along the way.
I think we should move on. There's quite a few questions that I think will be addressed on the next few slides. So if we move
Yep.
on, and then if they're not addressed, then I'll ask them.
All right, very good. So moving on, this next subject is evaluation of players, and I'm just going to put it up to the coaches. We'll go in alphabetical order by last name. So the first question, just in general, what do you coaches look for in a recruit? What are some best practices? When can they reach out, and what's the best way to reach out to you? We'll start with Nikki Clement, Haverford College. Go ahead, Nikki.
Sure. I think standard of play, squash level is, one of the more apparent factors for what coaches are looking for. But there's a lot of other really relevant factors as well. The potential for improvement, how much potential that player has to improve and contribute during their 4 years is certainly a question all coaches are wondering. Coachability. Is the student hungry to learn and has a positive, responsive attitude? Once you get to college, you are working with these coaches and team members for 4 years. And so that these kinds of questions are really relevant as well. And best practices for contacting coaches, make it as easy as you can for coaches. Fill out that recruit questionnaire that is on most, if not every single team page. Follow it up with an email, just introducing yourself. If you've been able to upload a video of your play, indicate which of the players you are in the video, and submit as much academic and athletic information to the coaches as possible. And don't be afraid to follow up with coaches as well and really get that conversation started when you're ready.
Great. Thanks, Nikki. Dylan Cunningham, Drexel University.
So looking at a recruit, definitely looking at, like Nikki said, fundamentals. What base of play do you have? How good is your standard? That's going to be really important for all the teams based on what the team's goals are in the next couple of years. I like to look for coachability too, so I like to watch the interactions between the coaches and the players in between games and see if the players are trying to change up the game plan or trying to think a little bit more. And then enthusiasm, a joy for the game, because 4 years of college squash is a long time, so you have to really love it to excel. And then best practices for contacting coaches. I always like the email to start. An email introducing yourself, where you're from, like Nikki said, a video maybe, and definitely tell us which player you are, because it's hard for us to guess. And then I'd say be ready to have some phone calls. That's one thing, especially if you're a freshman, sophomore, or junior. You're gonna have a lot of phone calls. So while the email is the best way to start, a lot of it's going to start switching to phone calls, and you're going to have to be comfortable talking to multiple coaches on the phone and about a bunch of different stuff. So
thanks Dylan. Mike McDonald. Oh, sorry, Mark Lewis. Don't know my alphabet. Mark, go ahead. You're on mute though, Mark.
Got it. I think all of the things that Dylan and Nikki have said are crucial. I think we all look at where people are, what their standard is. We look at their rating. In some cases, we look at ranking. I think that the more, in terms of best practices, what a student athlete can do to position themselves to become a more attractive candidate at a particular school, I just find that the more that the student kind of owns the process, the better. The more they communicate clearly with the coach, whether it's via email or filling out the recruiting form or both. That really is something that really hits home for me. When a kid can speak pretty clearly about what they're looking for, and if they can't speak clearly about what they're looking for, they can at least speak about the passion they have for the game, why they love to learn, what they want to study maybe outside of squash. Because in large measure, our jobs are not only just about being squash coaches, we're about kind of helping these players who we get to know very, very well over the course of 4 years. We get to know them well and get to help them, find their way and their next steps, whether it's playing professionally or going into the professional world, whatever that may be. But I think the more that I look for student athletes who really are owning the process as much as possible and demonstrating kind of consistently good behavior, whether it's in the video, and all of that kind of fits into, are they at the level of our team? So I'll compare, sometimes we can compare our overall team kind of rating with what the rating of a particular player is, and sometimes they don't match, but the player may fit the team really, really well. And the personalities just may mesh. So that's a big part of it. So, and we can only do that through lots of phone calls, as Dylan said, conversations that allow us to get to know the student athlete.
Thanks, Mark. Now, Mike, Connecticut College, go ahead.
Yeah, I completely agree with what everyone is saying so far. Right now, with COVID going on and limiting our interaction and our ability to go to tournaments and see you all play, it's tough to gauge and get some of that other non-club locker, non data points and see more of the intangibles. But I would say, when we are contacted by you, when we are having conversations with you, we're looking for someone who is interested in the school. We're looking for someone who actually has questions about the institution, not just about the team, but what majors are available, how does scheduling work, someone who's a bit more passionate about your school. I would say, as along with that email that you send along, that first email, that initial contact, when you have that video, that's going to be really important, especially, going forward. We don't want to see a highlight reel. We want to see something that's, a more complete game or, complete drilling session, something like that, where we can see both the good shots and the bad shots and how you sort of, overcome something. Maybe it was a mistake or something that you made in your game, things like that. Those are a bit of, along with everything else that's been said so far, what we're ultimately looking for. And then when you are contacting various coaches, make sure that you have the right school and the right coach's name in your email. That is important. That's right away can make or break the contact with a coach. So proofread, it's important.
Great point, Mike. That is incredibly important. All right, Gail, you're up.
Yes, we've all gotten a couple of those. So gosh, yeah, everybody has covered that pretty thorough. If I had to pinpoint a couple things, I feel like I'm looking. I think a lot of coaches are looking for people who really know what they want, and that means they've done their homework. They've looked at schools before they even reached out, and they've really gotten a good understanding of what each institution, excuse me, that they are interested in will offer them academically to some degree. I don't think people really know where they're going to end up at the end of 4 years, but they have an idea about going into it, about where they want to start academically. And I also think the important part is the matching it like squash wise. Will I be successful here at this institution on the court and off the court? So those are the points that I find that I'm always impressed by, if people can, really do their homework and research it and know what they're looking for. And of course, always have multiple options is always a good way to go. And I'm just, anybody wants to reach out. I think all coaches like to hear from players who are interested. If they're interested in the school or the program, it's quite flattering anyway. So don't be afraid to reach out. But responsiveness is really good, and being consistent. So yeah, I'm happy to text, email, and and phone call, but it's always good to have some questions ready for the coach and engage in conversation with them. It makes it more fun, I think, for both parties.
Fantastic. One thing that came up on last call that I think was an important point as well is, because this is uncharted territory, it opens up the box for recruits in particular to be creative about how they reach out. And there are so many tools today that are easily accessible to make yourself stand out. And it's worth considering what, instead of sending a regular email or a regular video, if you don't have the opportunity to meet somebody in person, how can you let a coach in on who you are and what your ideals are and things like that? So worth considering it as well. Kim, if you can go on the next one, we'll start with Gail and we'll go the opposite way, give her a chance to address it first. This came up a little bit. Mike alluded to it. We understand they're not the typical tournaments and access that we've had in the past. So coaches, how do you see this playing out? How will you be evaluated? How will the players be evaluated this year in a different sort of ways?
Yeah, I feel we've been fortunate to see a fair amount of the skill level in this class of the high school class of 2022, and that's sort of the up class right now. So I think really letting the coaches know that you're continuing the growth of your play if possible, if not fitness wise, that type of information, and some sort of verification of that would be really helpful in evaluating recruits this year. It's a tough year. It's the competitive side of it right now is shut down, and that's a big part of it. But I think a lot of the U.S. juniors and international players have invested quite a bit up to this point. So I think they're in probably pretty good situation. But I think if they can show some kind of growth in areas, if they're not on court, how can we share that with the coaches and make them aware of how much they are still connected to the game and improving.
Excellent. Mike, going back your way.
I think, as we've all mentioned, there's a lot of different ways that you can, contact and things that you can send to the various coaches, including the video. So we might not be able to see you in person at a silver or gold level tournament, but you can always, as clubs are opening up, you can send a video of yourself playing. If you're going to send a match, we want to see you play against someone who is of the same or similar skill level. It's not really that interesting if we watch a video of you, beating up on someone who is, a beginner or a novice or something like that. So we want to see things, you constructing points, strategies, things like that. And again, communication right now is going to be really important. How much are you talking with the coach? Are you following up with their emails? Are you expressing interest? We want to learn about you. This is a great opportunity for us to learn more about you as a person, and how you might fit in on our teams.
Thanks, Mike. Mark, on to you.
In addition to the videos and the outreach, I think another piece is, I know a lot of junior players, not junior year, but overall junior players have coaches. And I recommend that you connect the dots, connect us to your coaches. Having people kind of vouch for you is a really, really good thing. People who can speak to your character is a pretty valuable tool, because I think every coach is really looking to recruit good people. We all may define that a little bit differently, but I think your coaches and your peers are the people who vouch for you. And I think I definitely use that in the recruiting process. I'll talk to the private coaches and high school coaches, and that's a good thing. In addition to the videos, in addition to your ability to kind of speak clearly about either what you want or about how you learn. or the ability to speak clearly about how you've been training during COVID. I think those are all pieces of the puzzle.
Great. Thanks, Mark. Dylan, your turn.
I think this is kind of going off what Gail said, especially with this graduation class of 2022. We've probably already seen some of your matches or seen some players that you have results against. So we'll be going off that, as well as new video, and then yeah, it'll be a little more guesswork on our end this year than it usually is. But we're still going to be trying to do the best job that we can. So however you can present yourself in the best light will be really beneficial for you.
Nikki, any thoughts to add?
I think those are all really great points, and I think I would underline what Mark said. I think that a lot of the coaches are going to be calling high school coaches, personal coaches, college counselors at high schools, really just trying to do as much background work as possible to fill in some blanks. And, you know, Dylan is right that we probably have some video of you somewhere. If we don't, or if you're worried about that, you know, don't be afraid to send anything that you think might be helpful, solo, maybe, you know, your movement on the driveway, you know, anything that can kind of just help us figure out as much as we can. I'm going to guess that most coaches would really appreciate the creativity and really just kind of painting a picture as best as possible if certain things that we're used to are not options.
Thanks. Great points from everyone. I do want to also bring up we're in the process or under discussion of trying to create some new events, kind of offering ways to safely showcase players that maybe aren't in national tournaments or even some regional tournaments, but some other ways to provide some viewing opportunities, whether it's live streaming or on-demand video. So stay tuned for that. We're not exactly sure what that looks like yet, but it's a discussion we're having right now. So we don't want to completely shut out those opportunities, and in fact trying to come up, create some fun new ways to showcase your talents and do it on a kind of like a really localized basis. Kim, if you could go to the next one. I know we're getting a lot of questions about ratings and rankings and how that factors in, not just, somewhat in general, but also in this year in particular, since the rankings have been frozen since March, and some ratings changes are on the horizon. Coach, a lot of players on the call are curious about how you'll take that information and use it as part of your recruiting process for the current classes, and also looking ahead. Nikki, you're up to start for this question.
I think they're a helpful jumping off point, but I think we all know that they don't always reflect someone's aptitude or all these other intangibles that we're talking about. So I think they're helpful initially, but don't always. I don't know that players should fixate too much on those qualitative factors compared to these other factors that we've been talking about.
I'd say it's a good starting point for us, especially for the players we don't know. A lot of us have met players at camps, or the community is so small that we have an idea of where certain players are, and maybe that we know that their rankings and ratings aren't perfect. So if you think you have a low rating or a low ranking, don't let that hamper your goal. Go after the coach. The coach may not reach out to you because they don't see you, but that doesn't mean that they wouldn't be interested. And if you reach out and you show, what everyone on this call has been saying, good character, your coaches vouch for you, there's signs of improvement, and there's a sign of wanting to improve, we can look past the rating and the ranking and put our faith in you and have you come into the program and do really well over 4 years. you don't have to be number one on the team to be a super good contribution to the team. So a good ranking and rating is good, but if you don't think your ranking and rating is accurate, there's still a really good chance that coaches will be interested. So reach out to them.
Tell your story. There you go. Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with everything Dylan just said, and what Nikki said as well. I think the ratings and rankings are really just a starting point, and I've found that I've used them, and they've been accurate in some cases, and in other cases they've been completely way off. So it really hinges on, I think, what a student is willing to do to find the school that fits, where the fit is right. And that's what we're all looking for. We're looking for a student who fits with our program. You're looking for a school that fits who you are and what you want to study and what you want to do. And the more we kind of have conversations about that, it puts the rankings and the ratings a little further down on the list, ultimately about how we make our decision.
Great. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said so far. It's definitely a benchmark starting point as we sort of create a profile for everyone. One thing I meant to mention earlier is there's some juniors that play more high school squash than they do individual tournaments. And so, college squash is a team sport. So some of you might not understand the dynamic of being part of a team, but some of you might be on just a team and not playing as many tournaments. So you might feel like your ranking and your rating are not, reflected accurately. And so we are all aware of that. And we take those things into account. But again, these are all parts of an overall profile that we're creating and seeing how you are as a person, as a squash player, and how the fit would be for our institutions.
Excellent. Gail, last word on this?
Yeah, no, I agree across the board with the coaches, and it'll encourage. Hopefully, you'll be encouraged to find ways to get some ladder matches, club mates matches, and videotape them and show your improvement. Because we could be looking at 6-month-old ratings and rankings that don't really do you justice as athletes and growing squash players. So it is a little bit more on the students now to really kind of athletes to find a way to get their image across and where they've come with their squash in the next few months. So, and coaches will be more than happy to see videos and really take a close look at them and look for the growth. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Gail. It's really an opportunity to advocate for yourselves. Like Dylan said before about other things, everyone's in the same boat. Everything's been frozen, and so being creative and finding a way to differentiate yourself or tell your story is going to be really important. And much like the SAT or the ACT, the standardized tests in the application process, it's just one tool that these coaches use to evaluate you. There's a lot more factors that go into it, and it just because it's not as accurate this time, other things may be magnified, and so you'll have to find a way to step in. Just quickly, I'll address a couple of questions that have come in. When do verbal offers start? I think we addressed that a little bit. They can start as early as September 1st, although that's pretty rare, I would say. My intuition is that it might be happening a little earlier for a few more people in this cycle, but I don't know that for certain. I'm not getting those offers, so I'm not sure who's asking or who's receiving them. But it changes from year to year, and it changes from school to school. So it's hard to really provide one strict answer on that. The same goes for a balance. What's the ideal balance that coaches are looking for between athletics, academics, and extracurriculars? We had one of the coaches on last week's call say they love having multi-sport athletes, the student athletes who are playing different sports in other seasons. They're not It shows a different mentality or way to adjust. But every coach values those things differently, and every school values those things differently as part of the application process. And so that's the type of question, what balance are you looking for between academics, athletics, and extracurriculars that you're gonna want to ask the coaches directly. And it shows that you're thinking about that stuff. So it's a great question to ask. We got a question about ranking cutoff for certain leagues. The Ivy Leagues and NESCAC are two conferences that sponsor squash. Again, there's no tried and true answer to this. You can't really prescribe what ranking is gonna automatically get you into a school or a team in a conference. So, and again, because those rankings are frozen right now, a lot of them might be inaccurate, and the fact that people have not been able to play over the last several months also impacts that as well. So that worrying about cutoff or numbers and bans or anything like that is probably not the best place to put your concern right now. You have lots of areas to focus on moving forward. I think, Kim, any other questions we haven't addressed on that front?
One question here is, you've all talked about perhaps using rating or looking at Club Locker profile for showing activity. Would you recommend that if a player can, and it's safe to do so, that they show that they're engaged during this time? So if their club is open, they should just play some box leagues or ladders or friendly matches, or to show that engagement on their profile, so that it shows you they're still interested in squash and they're still kind of active. Obviously, if it's safe to do so. Is that something that that players should be thinking about?
Coaches, give a thumbs up or a nod. We'll do this quickly. I want to move on. Yeah, I think that's generally a positive. Shows an interest that the coaches have talked about. I think the key that Kim, the key word that or phrase that Kim just used was safely. Sacrificing your health or your safety for the sake of a few ratings points is not something that we recommend or stand behind, or showing activity in squash. So we really want you to be safe and healthy through this process. And if it means waiting a little bit or finding a more standardized opportunity to play, where you'll get a few more matches involved, then it may be worth holding off. So just be mindful of that safety piece. But yes, if it's safe to do so and you have the opportunity to play a match where you could videotape and show some activity, I think that would definitely be well received. Okay, Kim, let's move on to the next slide. So these are, I think we got a lot of questions about gap years and deferrals, particularly because of the challenges that schools are facing opening back up and remote learning, and the impact that it's having on student athletes across the board, not just squash players. Yeah, really curious, Gail, if we can start with you, your thoughts on how gap years and deferrals are affecting the process, and if you would, for seniors, seniors who are entering their last year of high school now, how would you recommend a gap year, or if the team that they were hoping to go to has lost their varsity status, what would you recommend? Anything related to the gap year deferral process, we're eager to hear about. So Gail, go ahead, you can go first.
Yeah. This is a unusual time and situation that with people taking a gap year and also leaves, which actually also affects each class for a few years out. But it's all relative, and each institution has their own way to address it and move on it. So I think that the best policy is to make check with coaches, and it's a good question to ask. I'm always happy to offer up how many spots I have, and if I don't know, I say I don't know. So I think all the coaches would be upfront and honest with you about that. And I mean, taking a gap year, applying and taking a gap year after admitted, not applying, and then applying the next year, that could be a good option for some people if the institutions that are really on their high on their list have shortages of spots if that's the case. And again, it's like institution to institution, and you really need to communicate well with the coaches to see the big picture. Personally, I don't think I think it's a personal thing. If 4 years of squash is going to make your career and you have a chance of doing it, a gap year might be the best thing for you. I have this year, I think we, all the coaches have students who are starting up in spite of, being remote at school. And so I do think it's a pretty personal thing, but I think ask the coaches, communicate with them, put everything out on the table so they know what you're thinking, and they can help you in some way of determining what's the best direction for you at the time.
Thanks, Gail. Mike McDonald will pass it to you.
Yeah, I think this is certainly going to have a ripple effect down the road. I think, it's going to be, as Gail said, institution to institution based. So certainly checking in with coaches, seeing how this might have affected the number of spots they might have available, how their recruitment strategy may change. For some individuals, it might make sense to take a gap year. For others, it might make sense just to go to college and start, and hopefully, college squash continues as normal after this year or later on this year. But if you're considering taking a gap year, my advice would be make the most of your time off. Don't just stay at home and watch TV, but are there travel opportunities? Are there volunteer opportunities? Are there, what can you do to be productive during your time off if you're considering a gap year? That's what I've challenged some individuals to consider. I don't think a gap year is a bad thing. I think, make the most of your time.
Good call. Mark Lewis.
I think a lot of it is, as Gail and Mike have alluded to, that it's a numbers game a lot for the admissions offices. And so we're not going to know those, what those numbers are until they see how many applications they get, how many accept, and then they start to tell us how many players and student athletes we can recruit each, for that next year. So whether you take a gap year, obviously with the pandemic going on, I think it's definitely going to influence things. Exactly how, I think, as everybody said, we don't know exactly how. And at the same time, a gap year is a very personal decision, and I think it works for some, and for others it doesn't. And I think it's something that, like Mike just said, you definitely want to make the most of it if you're going to go that route, and make sure you have conversations about with the coach about what you're going to do and why you're doing it, whether that's prior to applying or after you've been admitted and you want to take a gap year. Either way, the importance kind of it, the conversation about taking a gap year really kind of highlights the importance of how well you communicate with the coach about what you do. And I just think it's so uncertain now with how long the pandemic's going to last and how recruiting numbers are going to look. But when you make that decision, just stay in touch and make sure that you're communicating clearly about what you're doing.
Dylan.
Yeah, I agree with Mark, Mike, and Gail. It's really important that you have a plan for your gap year, because admissions is going to ask, what did you do? And if you I sat on my couch and watched TV, they're not going to be happy. So, but gap years can be very beneficial, and it would be an individual discussion. And I'd say a big thing is where I'm thinking about this is if you take a gap year, you're going to be put into the next recruiting class most of the time. So you can't just like, oh, I'm going to take a gap year so I'm the best recruit for the next year. You'll just be in the new cohort of recruits most of the time. So that's something to consider. It'd be very hard to, you're not necessarily just going to get your first choice because you take a gap year. You're going to go back into the pool of recruits. And then all these discussions about spots and grades, and athletics will start again.
Thanks, Dylan. Nikki, anything to add?
Not really anything to add. Just would echo, that it's a choice that you and your family can make based on what's best for you and your goals, and also, taking into account what coaches have communicated to you about, some of the factors that Dylan just mentioned, and, just really underlining that it's such an uncertain time. I don't know that anybody has the answers, but so really just doing what's best for you and your family is probably going to set you up for the best path.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Nikki. I think that uncertainty is really, really key to keep in mind right now, because this pandemic is impacting not just college athletics or the squash world, but higher education on the whole. And there are just a lot of decisions either being made or being put on hold right now that we can't even know about or can't really be familiar with, and how it's going to play out in the end. And so, making that smart personal decisions and thinking through, what your options are is going to be really critical right now. It's ultimately about what you value out of a college experience. So, no easy answer there. Kim, if you could go to the next one. This is another question that we received about international recruiting and how it might be affected. I'll just say briefly, I think with the pandemic, as a lot of us know, there are travel restrictions right now, and unsure how that's gonna play out moving forward. I know a number of players who are expecting to come to campus this fall are having, international players in particular are having trouble getting visa appointments in the United States and setting themselves up as they normally would have. So overall, it's definitely a challenge, but I'll leave it up to the coaches to talk about, what they've seen so far and how they expect it to play out. This is an open one, guys. So whoever has thoughts on the international recruiting piece, please jump in. Go ahead.
I got my one big thing is just as a lot of you have concerns about, how are we gonna figure out how good you are at squash, the international kids are gonna have a lot harder time making that case for themselves. A lot of we as college coaches, we look at the British Junior Open, the World Junior Open, and those didn't happen this year. So international recruiting could be a little tough for them to make a case. But I think it would be a good opportunity as an American. I think most people on this call are U.S. You have a good opportunity to make a really strong case for yourself. We know the school you go to. We know the players you play against. We know how well you did last year. We have a good sense for where U.S. squash is. We have a better sense for where U.S. squash is than international squash. So while international players will still come over and they'll still get recruited, I think Americans have a good chance to what all the coaches have been talking about is building that resume for yourself, or selling yourself, or telling your story a little bit better, because we don't have some of the same international chances to recruit.
Excellent point. Okay. A couple other questions we got on other impacts. Want to ask about, someone asked about walk-ons and how those are viewed, if they're a possibility. Are walk-ons, I think people are concerned that if there end up being not as many options for coaches to support players in the admissions process, or players who are not recruited able to walk on to teams and compete.
It's got to be a school by school kind of policy, I think. I don't think there's going to be any, I think each of us kind of handle that in our own way. And I think the factors that influence walk-ons, do we take them, how many, it depends on our budget, it depends on our size of our teams. And those are two factors right away that will tell us, okay, well, if we're a team of 12, there's not too much room for walk-ons. If we're a team of 16, then maybe there might be room for walk-ons. If we're a team of 10, then, and it's a recruited team, again, it's going to vary from school to school, I think, but I think it's, again, that's a conversation that you have with each coach, with the school and the coach that you are looking at, to see kind of where you stand. And I would go into that with having done some research, know kind of where you think you might fit on the ladder, and then have a conversation with the coach and let them know that you're really interested in trying out or being a walk-on, and those are your kind of best chances.
Okay. Thanks, Mark. Good answer. We got a question about Canadian players. Canadian players can definitely play on U.S. teams. Just like really last year or 2 years, sorry, rosters from 2 years ago, we had players from 53 different countries on our rosters across the CSA. So we are welcoming talent from all over the world, and you can definitely play. But every school has different policies around financial aid and admissions and things like that. So again, your research is going to be critical, and your comfort level in traveling and coming down to U.S. institutions is really a personal decision. But we certainly don't turn away players who are interested in playing college squash in CSA member schools, regardless of what country you come from. Kim, do you see any other questions come in that we haven't addressed?
No, I think we can move on.
Okay. Well,
is that the last slide?
That's it. I mean, that's it. If there are other questions that anyone wants to speak up and ask about, anything in particular they haven't heard from us today, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask away. And I always offer, if not, that's fine too. You can reach out to Kim if you're comfortable. You can reach out to the CSA, like I said, at admin@csasquash.com with questions down the road. And we'll be happy to answer them, or I'll pass them on to coaches as necessary to gather more information. But again, leaving it up, if anyone has any questions, give it a couple more seconds.
If a junior was wanting to improve on their ranking and skills during the year, during the regular squash season, how is that time frame going to be affected? Will they still be able to be recruited or be considered recruited if they had planned to improve themselves within that winter time, I guess?
So the question is, how can you show your development over this sort of time when there's no tournament and competition, I think is the question.
Yeah, kind of. Right? That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah, I think yeah, you do have to be creative and obviously you probably need a court, you need a facility, you need coaching would always be. It's also a help you to improve your game. But I think it's how can you get the information to the coaches? And I think, as we talked a little bit earlier, I think we mentioned videos are really helpful. And again, different types of videos, anywhere from the actual training sessions that really kind of show your strengths and also challenges. I don't know, I guess, playing other people at the club that safely, of course, everything has to be done within COVID rules and regulations and your well-being. But I think it's a little bit tough, but I wouldn't let it deter you from trying your hardest and getting that information to the coaches. And I'm sure you'll find a way. It just takes a little extra effort.
Thank you.
Can I just jump in and say that we are working very closely with all the clubs and all the teaching pros in the country to to work out a schedule of events that would be local, that would be rating based, and would be competitive, so that you can show how well you're doing and show how you're improving using those events. It's not the point system that we know, but it's a rating system. And so I think that provides an environment that the coaches would be looking or be happy to see, so you can showcase your playing ability.
Yeah, we'd love to see stuff like that. That'd be fun. That'd be fun to see.
Great question. We got another one about contacting coaches before your junior year to share results or activity. That I just want to clarify, that is allowed. You at any point, you as prospective student athletes may send an email or reach out to coaches with what's going on in your squash playing or your academics, or just to try and introduce yourself, get on their radar in some way, or maybe you interacted with them at a camp in a previous year. That is fine and allowed and compliant. You just should not expect a response from the coaches if that happens. You can you can have a one-sided dialogue and share as much information as you want, but coaches are not allowed to reach back out to you until that September 1st of your junior year. So that it's permissible for you to reach out to them via email and say hello, but if you call them or you expect a response, I wouldn't do that, because if they did that, that would be a violation of the rules. Looks like we got another question coming in. This is a good one. If I'm about to enter my senior year, is it too late to reach out to coaches? Coaches, do you have a response to that? Nikki, go ahead.
I would say no, it is not too late. I don't think it's really, it depends on the school, but all these different colleges are at different phases of them forming their next class, and you just won't know that unless you ask. So it's really not a negative to reach out and find out as much as you can, and you never know what a coach might tell you.
I also think it's such a small community, and all of us really want to see the sport grow. So say you reach out to Nikki, and Nikki says, "Hey, sorry, I can't help you this year, but I was just talking to Dylan at Drexel, and I know that they're looking for one more player, so you should reach out to them." And then also Mark at Middlebury is looking, so they whether they can help you or they put you on to someone that can help you. So always reaching out to coaches, it'll help in one way or another.
Great questions. We got a question: is a full resume expected when a player introduces themselves to a coach? Coaches, when you receive that intro email, are you expecting a full resume from the players?
No.
Mark. That's a no from Mark.
I'm not expecting it. I'll look at it and I'll read it, but I'm not expecting it. An introduction is an introduction, and a brief kind of introduction is a way to kind of capture my attention. I think, we all have shortened attention spans over the past couple of decades, and I think that if you can kind of get to your point pretty quickly about why you're interested in a particular school or for the studies or for the squash program or for whatever, and then basically expect a response, provided it's after September 1st of your junior year, expect a response from the coach and to continue that conversation. It's really about entering a conversation and then having that conversation continue and see through to the end of the recruiting process. That's really what it's about. Whether it's with getting a spot or finding out there isn't one, or doing as Dylan just said, getting a reference to another school. Maybe I have no spots left for one team, or I have some spots left on another team, but I know Drexel or Haverford have spots, and I can say I know these coaches, they know me. There's a lot that can be said between coaches that can help student athletes.
Mike or Nikki, do you want to add to that, or is that cover it?
I was just going to add to that yeah, I think the initial email can be as simple as, hey, I would love to learn more about your squash program or your school or whatever it is. You know, some emails are that simple. Some are, this is everything that I've done in junior squash at school, and it's a bit more involved, but, you know, similar to Coach Mark, really just want to start the conversation. And especially now, oftentimes it usually leads to a phone call or a similar Zoom call as we're having this evening. So just, again, it's nice to have as much detail sometimes as the email has, but often I really want to have a conversation with someone. That often leads to better intel on individual students.
Great.
Can I
Nikki,
just add one other thing? Yeah, sorry.
please. Yeah.
I was just going to say, jumping off of all of this, I think pretty soon after the initial conversation, you'll probably get the question from the coach, what are the grades of this student and what is the standard of play? Put most bluntly or you know, bullet points. So I think expecting those questions or providing those answers as early in the process as possible, if you have them, is going to save you some time, and kind of help you find direction. So keeping in mind that the coach is probably wondering what the student's academics are and what the standard of play is those are questions that will probably come soon after those initial conversations.
Great insight from everybody. Thank you all. I'm gonna wrap it up now. If we missed any of the questions that were out there, I think Kim wrote in the chat that our email addresses, if you don't have them already, feel free to reach out to us. I want a special thank you to our 5 coaches for taking the time this evening and sharing some great insight with us. So round of applause for you all. And also thanks to Kim and US Squash for providing this platform and making connections for us to the junior community and setting this up. Really grateful for the opportunity and looking forward to connecting more in the future. So thank you all for joining us. Kim, if you have anything else to add, I throw it back to you.
No, I think if anyone has any questions, because, you know, quite often you go away from these things and then you realize that you meant to ask something you didn't. So yeah, just please just send us an email, myself or David. I put our email addresses on the chat here, and it's also on the kind of tournament listing. So we're very happy to follow up with you should you want us to. So thank you all for being on the call. I think the coaches were fantastic tonight. Some really great information imparted, and hopefully that's all helped you understand the process a lot better.
Thanks, everybody.